Hello, everybody, and welcome. Good evening. My name is Sibel. I am your facilitator. Oh, hi there, Stephanie. Just give me 1 second. We just got started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So everyone, just hang tight. We just had some technical difficulties here. So just give us 1 second. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Yeah.
All right, everyone, we're going to get started here. Welcome to the College Fairs of Greater Denver. My name is Sibel. We're at a virtual panel here. I'll be your facilitator, but we do have our amazing presenter, Stephanie, and she'll be with us in just a second to give you some great information on scholarships. Now, with that said, just a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. Remember, this is a webinar format. Your camera and microphone are turned off, so the presenter cannot see or hear you. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Sibel, how in the world do I ask questions? That in and of itself is a great question. In your Zoom toolbar, there will be an icon. It will say Q&A. You will go ahead and click on that icon, and you will ask and type your questions to the presenters at any time. Now, remember, Stephanie only has about 40 to 45 minutes, okay? So about quarter of, we will have to unfortunately end the presentation. So with that said, please do not make sure please make sure that you're answering or getting those questions answered by the end of the presentation. Do not wait until the last minute to ask Stephanie your awesome questions, okay? Another thing too is we do have another virtual panel after this. So this is not the only one offered. There's another one after this. So please double check the schedule on the website to sign up for that session. If you'd like to relive the fun, all these sessions are actually being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/Greater Denver. Now, without further ado, I would love to introduce our presenter, Stephanie. She's here to talk to you a little bit about scholarships. So Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you very much, Sybil. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone's patience due to the technical difficulties. I apologize for the delayed start, but we will get going here. So with that, give me just another moment while I work on sharing my screen. Share that. We will start our slideshow from the beginning. And so today, as Sybil mentioned, we're going to talk about applying for scholarships. And so we're going to give you some tips on how to ace your scholarship applications. And that ace is going to come into play a little later as we move forward. So we wanted to talk a little bit holistically, so zooming out a little bit about how you're going to pay for college. So even though we're going to talk about scholarships more specifically, there are many ways that you can apply for college. Hopefully you'll be hearing some more about these throughout these webinars, but there are two main types of categories, which are gift aid, the kind that you are given that you do not have to pay back. But there's also self-help aid, which is a kind that you do pay back in one way or another. So of course, gift aid is like scholarships and grants, which are something you may be able to apply for more frequently when you are a college student. And those, again, are the type of aid you do not have to pay back. They are gifts that are given to you. Self-help aid, the kind that you do pay back, could be in the form of loans where you pay it back monetarily, or in work study where you pay it back by giving your time. While we are going to focus on scholarships because the gift aid is the kind we all want, I do want to point out that it's good to look into all the options that are available to you, including those that you do have to pay back, just because your financial aid could be made up of many kinds or a combination of aid to finance your college experience. So for instance, when I went to college, I financed it with some scholarships, which limited the amount of aid that I had to take back that I needed, or take out that I needed to pay back. But it helped create a financial aid package that it's in its entirety made it possible to afford school. So look at all your options and then look to see what is the best package you can create of financial aid to support your educational goals. So I wanted to, as I said, talk primarily about scholarships. And here are some places you can go to find information about scholarships. First of all, always start with your high school guidance counseling office. They are the primary place that most colleges and scholarships know to post that information. I may not know your name, your email address, but I can get the info for your counselor at their school and send the information to them. So they're often a good point of contact. Be sure you're also reaching out to colleges and universities themselves to ask what kind of scholarships and aid they provide, as well as the programs and departments within that. So colleges want you to go to their school, and so they sometimes have options for aid that will make it more affordable for you. So it's worth reaching out to them to see what kind of scholarships you can apply for through the college. And then, of course, if you're in the music department or you play in a sports program, they might have other sources of funding on top of that. Be sure you're also looking at community organizations such as civic, college access, cultural or religious organizations, anything in your community that might have an option for you. You never know. Sometimes your church might have a scholarship that they can award people in the congregation, or there might be other organizations you can reach out to. So for instance, my grandfather was a letter carrier, and so I got a scholarship from the US Postal Service that he heard about through his work. So just ask around. There might be places you could check out. Or of course, private foundations, businesses, or labor unions. So those are places like us at the Betcher Foundation that offer scholarships as well. So here is a slide that also lists a few websites you can check out. So go ahead, if you've got your camera on, take a screenshot of this, totally fine. These are just a few of many, many scholarship sites you can check out to get a start on searching for scholarships. Please know that you are much more tech savvy than I am, and you can probably find a zillion other sites to help you search, and that's fine. Look around, see what you can find on your own as well. I do just recommend that you don't pay for a scholarship search site. You can find so many free sources available to you, so you don't need to pay to have people find scholarships for you. Save that money for college. So again, here are some sites you can look at to get started on your journey. I do recommend in particular a couple, which are fastweb.com. It's kind of like a database where you can create a profile of yourself, and it helps find scholarships that are a match for your profile. And also scholarsnap.org, which is almost like a common app for scholarships. A lot of scholarships are linked into that, so that might be worth checking out as well. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide for those of you who are taking your picture. So we've talked very briefly, I know, a little bit about where to find scholarships, and that's because I want to spend the majority of this presentation talking about how you earn those scholarships. And I'm going to talk about earning them in two senses of the word. The first is how you earn them by what you do in high school to set yourself up for success. But then we're also going to talk about the act of applying for the scholarships themselves. That's the second way you earn them, because it's important that you fill out an application well in order to reflect all the hard work you did in high school, or else you're not doing a service to yourself if you're not putting in the work of earning the scholarships by filling out the application well. So we'll go into that. So this is where the ACE came in from our presentation title today. We have found that when you're applying for scholarships, especially merit-based scholarships, the key to success in applying for those is to focus on these three areas: your academics, your community service, and your extracurricular activities. So when you put them in this order, it just helps you remember those are the things you need to ace your scholarship applications. So we'll go ahead and break those down in a little more detail. So A, as we know, is for academics, which is what a lot of people think of when they hear particularly about merit-based scholarships. But academics are about so much more than just the GPA at the bottom of your transcript. Colleges and scholarships look at a lot more than just that. They look at things like a strong academic record, not only the ultimate GPA at the bottom, but if you're improving or what are the trends. So for instance, it's okay if you wobbled a little bit in your freshman year while you were kind of getting your footing, as long as maybe there's a trend that shows you improved over time. Or there could be a potential dip in the transcript if you had a personal circumstance that interrupted school, or for instance, we all know how COVID interrupted us. So if there's a little wobble right around the time of COVID, everybody understands that, but we can look at the trend to see that overall you're doing well in school. So we're looking at all of those kinds of things. We're also looking at the curriculum you're taking. Are you taking a rigorous course load showing that you're ready for college level work? That could be taking AP or IB level courses if your school offers them. If your school does not offer those, that's fine too. It's just making sure that you're taking advantage of the most challenging courses available to you at your school, or seeking out other opportunities to push and challenge yourself to prepare for college, such as maybe taking courses at a local community college. And of course, in some cases, academics include standardized test scores. I know that some places are going test optional, some are still test required, so definitely do take advantage of any opportunity to take those tests. If you're able to take them twice, that's great, because students tend to do better their second time. But if that's not something that's available to you, that's okay. Just make sure that when you do prepare to take your test, possibly on the free test date available to you through your school, that you prepare and practice and plan ahead, just to make sure that it's the best possible test that you can take in that single sitting. So that's a little bit about academics. We'll go on to the C now, which is community service. So for community service, I often get asked, what types of community service should I be doing, or how many hours? More than anything, scholarship providers are looking for what you see on this slide here, which is your depth of commitment, length of participation, and leadership and initiative. As it says on here, we're looking for the quality of your service over the quantity. It's much better if you find a few things, like maybe just 1 or 2 or 3 things that mean a lot to you, that encourage you to continue going back and volunteering on a more regular basis. Because when you do that, ongoing service to something that means something to you, you're going to find that you dive in a little deeper to that you're able to contribute and have more impact in a way that you would if you were just doing one afternoon at one organization, one afternoon at another organization, etc. If you're doing something long-term, your impact is much greater. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Again, the quality of your service versus the quantity. And we're going to do the same thing when we look at your extracurricular activities. I'm not going to tell you what clubs to be in, if you have to play a sport or a musical instrument. Again, it goes back to doing what is important to you and diving in a little deeper. So it's a lot of the same things that you saw on the last slide. And I do want to point out here that work is something that you can count as an extracurricular activity as well. So if you're working for experience or to contribute to your family income, make sure you count that as well, because that is an extracurricular activity where you're contributing to your family or your community in some way, and you want to get credit for it. So, and also think about, like, when you do activities with passion, maybe there's a way that you could combine these two things. So for instance, if your passion is dance, for instance, so that's one of your extracurricular activities that you're doing, is there a way you could employ a service aspect to that too? So maybe you're volunteering to teach younger students how to dance on your weekends. So you're combining your love of dance in a way that blends it with both your extracurriculars and your service. So there are ways that you can do that as well. So this is just a question that you can think about as you're thinking about those things, your extracurriculars, your service, your academics. Think about, what are the things you're passionate about? How can you do a deeper dive into those in those areas, your service, your extracurriculars, and then reflect those in your application. We'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go on, but yeah, just take a moment here to think about those things you're passionate about and how they might show up in what you do. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what we discussed earlier, which is making your application stand out. How can you now take everything that you've done while you're in high school and put it into your application in a way that helps you earn those scholarships? So you're doing the work now to take everything you've done and put it into an application. Okay. And so here's just a real quick exercise you can do, which is to look at this image and think about what you see. If you want, you can even throw it in the chat. Let me know what you see. I don't know if I have access to the chat in this presenter mode, and if not, that's okay. Just throw it in there. I know when I've presented before, some people look at this and they see a duck. It's kind of got its bill facing out to the left. Other people see a rabbit, and instead of a bill, they're seeing ears. Well, many of you might have seen this before and know it's one of those optical illusions where it can be this, it's actually the same image, and just depending on how you look at it, it could be a duck or a rabbit. So why I'm showing you this is because I've got what I think is my favorite tip for an application coming up, and that is to shift your perspective when you're applying for your scholarships or colleges. Take yourself out of the normal viewpoint you're looking at, which is I am filling out a college application about me, and instead pretend you're me, Stephanie, the person reading your application on the other side. You need to pretend that you don't know anything about yourself, your high school, your community, and read the application with that lens to make sure that you are being clear in your application about who you are, what you contributed, and why you're a good candidate for this scholarship, why you're competitive. And the reason that's so important is because it can be so easy for us to get caught up in our own context, assuming everybody knows the same things we do and has that same perspective, that you forget how it looks on the other side. So for instance, I talk about the fact that when I was in high school, I was in a club called Colts in Action. And if I put that on an application, it may be cool to me because I know what it was, but I'm willing to bet none of you know what that is. And if you don't know what that is, how is a college or scholarship reader going to know what it is? So you need to stop and think about it and how you're writing it, and if you're giving a description that helps the reader on the other side. So you want to make sure you take a moment before you submit it to shift your perspective and read it with almost a fresh set of eyes to see what you can do to make it clearer. So that's a good tip right there. So we're going to continue talking about how you can present yourself on the application. So again, shifting your perspective, presenting yourself in a way that shows that you're not only competitive, but compelling. We're looking for both of those things. So a lot of people think, again, like with the academics, that it comes down to just numbers, and it really doesn't. The numbers give us a gauge, so things like your GPA and your test score, but that is not the whole story of you. We want to look for students who are both competitive and compelling, because if we have a lot of scholars who maybe look rather similar in terms of GPA, the thing that's going to make you stand out in our mind are the things that make you unique. Your talents, your hobbies, stories that you tell in your essay, the things that are basically what make you a different person from the other person sitting next to you in class or applying for the scholarship. So you want to take time to make sure that you let your own voice and personality show through. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but hopefully that lets you know that you can relax a little in terms of worrying about just the numbers, and know that being yourself may be the thing that just helps put you over the edge, because you are a compelling person as well as a competitive one. So I've got some examples of how you can do that. So this is going to harken back to things that make you compelling, and also talk about shifting your perspectives with a few examples here. So if you're if you're going to talk about a service activity, some people might just put food bank volunteer. I could see 100 applications that have food bank volunteer. What's going to make you unique? What's going to make you unique is the thing that you did as a food bank volunteer, not what everybody else did. So in this case, this person volunteered 20 hours per week to collect canned food and coordinated a food basket distribution. So that tells me a lot right there. 20 hours per week is that length of participation that we talked about. So it's making it very clear that you go back to this on a regular basis. Coordinated a food basket distribution tells me that you have some leadership and initiative. You've been there long enough that they entrust you with a leadership position. That's not something that they're going to do if you go there just for 2 hours on one Saturday. So this is a person who's committed to this organization, and that is a very compelling thing that might make you stand out from everybody else who put food bank volunteer. Just another example, student council. Again, you might think, hey, is student council is an organization that everybody knows? We all do, right? So you might think that's enough, but really it's not going to tell me what you contributed as an individual if you just put this? How do I know if you were the person just sitting in the back of the room, not volunteering for anything? So you want to fill it out with what you contributed to make it unique and compelling. And in this case, this person put in a ton of leadership. They were the vice president. They represented their school at a conference. They served as chair of the prom committee. That is going to make that person stand out in my mind more than anybody who just put student council. So those are some examples of how you can shift your perspective and make yourself a compelling candidate as well as a competitive one. So I mentioned a little earlier the fact that some of this is going to come through in your essays. And that is true because your essay is the one place where you can really let your voice shine and let your personality come through. Because a lot of the applications start out with that point where you're just filling in the blanks, where you're just kind of putting things into a form, but your essay is where you have a little bit of space to tell your own story, and you want to make sure that you're telling it as you, not as anybody else. So essays help with the shifting of the perspective because they also tell us the why and the how behind the what you're doing. So again, we talked about you're in student council. This is a chance to maybe explain to us why it's important you to be in that group as a leader. Why did you get involved? How do you do what you do, etc. So take your time to tell us about yourself in these essays. You also want to make sure that you're taking your time writing them because they are a demonstration of your academic ability. Remember, we're also going back to ACE. So this should be a sample of your best writing ability. So you want to make sure you proofread it, that it's clear and focused. You want to also make sure that you're answering the essay prompt directly. The colleges and scholarships are asking for those prompts for a reason. They're trying to get to certain information about you. So even though some essays might look fairly similar and you might be able to have a sort of template of what you want to talk about, you need to make sure that you tweak every essay enough to make sure you're answering the essay prompts. So definitely make sure you're doing that. Again, as I mentioned, this is your chance to tell us something new in your application. Maybe there was something you weren't able to put into the resume section, but here is your chance to tell us about that thing that's really important to you, that provides insight into who you are, your interests, your values, and your ethic. And remember, this should be your voice, not anyone else's. It's definitely okay to let somebody else read it and offer their opinion, but remember, it should be you, because that's who we want to know, not your teacher's voice, not your parents' voice or your brother or sister's voice as they're helping you. We want to hear your stories in your voice. So make sure that you take your time on your essays to let your voice shine through. And as you're preparing to write those essays, here are just a few tips for you. You want to make sure that you get started, maybe even the summer before you apply for colleges and scholarships, just to kind of get practice or a head start. Just free write at first. It's okay to have a bad first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Let yourself just write. And write continuously. Don't stop and critique yourself. Just write it all out, and then you can go back after a few days with fresh eyes to review it. And you want to maybe try reading it out loud to make sure that as you're reading it out loud, it sounds like it's flowing naturally. It reads the way you want it to. And also be sure that you're not using, for instance, casual chat. While we want it to be in your voice, this is not where you should put in text that would appear the way that you would in a text message. No emojis, no little abbreviations. You want to make sure that you're writing it all out. Be careful not to only say, I did this or that. You want to make sure that, yes, you are telling your story, but also when other people are included, making sure you're sharing that too. So, making sure you're giving credit where it's due while also taking ownership of those that are your contributions. I wanted to also, in the next couple of slides, just give you some recommendations about things that you can do for other parts of your applications that may not be the written part. First is letters of recommendation. So you might be asked to submit those, and even though other people are writing them for you, they are your responsibility. This is your application, so it is your responsibility to manage the letters of recommendation. So you want to make sure you're tracking on some of these things. First, you want to make sure you pick someone who knows you well and can speak to you. That's more important than having somebody with just a fancy title who doesn't know you. You want these people to add to your application, not just repeat. As you know, Stephanie has a such and such GPA and was in these 3 clubs. I already know that from reading your application. I want them to tell stories or give examples of how they've seen you in the classroom or in your service activity. So they should be able to add to it. Go ahead and still give them a resume, even if they know you, just because they might not know all the sides of you. So for instance, your teacher may not know that even though you're killing it in class, you're doing it on top of holding down a part-time job to help your family. And that might be something that they could put in there about how impressive that is, that you're able to juggle those things. You also want to highlight the selection criteria and requirements for them as well. Just like you need to be tailoring your essay to meet the needs of the scholarship or college you're applying for, you want them to do the same. They should not just submit the same letter to 5 different schools or scholarships. They should be tailoring it to meet the criteria. Help give them an idea of what their role is. For instance, if you want a teacher to talk about if you want a teacher who's your sponsor in a club to talk about your experience in that club, make sure they know that. Let them know, I want you to talk about how you've seen me show up in this organization because I have another teacher talking about how I am in the classroom. Again, it's making sure we're adding to your application and not that you have 2 teachers writing essentially the same thing. One is writing about classroom, one is writing about service organization. So you want to do that. You want to make sure you give them plenty of notice because they are taking their time to do this for you and you want them to do a good job. And so it's just professional courtesy to give them notice before the deadline and also follow up with them afterwards to thank them. You want to make sure when you are submitting your application as well that you are thinking about how it's going to look on the other end. So again, shifting your perspective, you want to make sure that you're presenting a professional product. So again, make sure you edit and proofread everything before you send it in and think about how you're typing it. If you type everything in lowercase, including your name, that's how it's going to show up on our side, or in all caps, that's how it's going to show up to us. So think about when you're typing it in, how it's going to look on the other end. Follow all the deadline instructions. So even beat the deadline. Do not wait until the last minute to submit your application. Tech issues happen. So it's better to submit your application a few hours or even a couple of days before the deadline, just to make sure if there's any kind of problem or glitch, you have time to deal with it rather than waiting until the last minute. Be sure you're also reading the tips and hints in the application itself. The instructions are there for a reason. They tell you how to fill out the application. So many people get stuck at the very last minute. They're like, I can't submit my app because I'm getting an error message and I don't know why. And oftentimes they just haven't taken the time to read the instructions in a way that lets them know they went over a word limit or something. So make sure you're doing that and that you're keeping copies of everything. Again, so that if you need to resubmit anything, you've got your essays saved in a Word document where you can just copy and paste it without having to start from scratch. I just have a brief slide here about interview tips in case you are ever asked to interview. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide just because I know this may or may not apply to everything that you're doing, but just a couple of things I'll highlight. Number 1, be yourself. Just like your essays need to be in your own voice, when you show up for an interview, you want to be yourself. That's who we're trying to get to know. So don't feel like you have to be something you're not or whatever you think we want you to be. Just be yourself. That's who we want. Review your application. So this is where it's good to have kept a copy in case you want to provide an update to anything you might have shared earlier or to fill in a gap that you weren't able to in the paper application itself. You want to, if at all possible, practice for the interview with a mock interview. You don't want to get to the point where you're so scripted and have all your answers memorized. That's not the point. The point is just to get to a place where you're comfortable having a conversation, where people are asking you questions and you're comfortable answering them. Just getting those nerves out so that when you show up in front of a committee, you're able to speak about yourself authentically and not be robotic, but also not be scared stiff. You just want to have a conversation. And you want to make sure you dress appropriately. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and buy something new. It just means you want to look like the best version of yourself. Again, hearkening back to being yourself. So those are just a few tips there. So just being mindful of time, I want to run through some quick slides about the Boettcher Foundation itself and our scholarship specifically. So I'll run through that real quick and then try and get through some questions before we close tonight. So our scholarship is one of Colorado's oldest and most prestigious merit-based scholarship, and it was created with the intent to keep Colorado students in Colorado for their education. We have a lot of great institutions here, and we want to encourage students to continue their education at one of those. We award 50 scholarships each year that can be used at any four-year college or university in Colorado, public or private. And we have two funding models. So depending on which school you go to, the funding model will either cover the full tuition and fees at that school or the entire cost of attendance. And we also have some additional grants you can apply for on top of that to finance other educational opportunities. So the cost of attendance model that I mentioned, in that we at the foundation pay $20,000 per year to the scholar, and the students who go to these schools then have the help of the institution using their own aid to bring the value of the scholarship up to the full cost of attendance. So these are the schools under which that model applies. And then I think I'm going to skip this slide. It's just a breakdown, but I want to be respectful of time. Under the tuition and fees model, again, we at Boettcher pay $20,000 per year. And these schools bring up the value of the scholarship up to the full tuition and fees. So they will guarantee coverage of tuition and fees. Students may be eligible for other aid on top of that will help fill in any gap for housing, et cetera. And that is just determined by application processes as they go through, but we can at least guarantee full tuition and fees under this model. So my tip is, if you're applying for the Boettcher Scholarship, which I hope you do, apply for any Colorado school you're interested in, and then the schools will work with you to figure out what the scholarship would look like at that school. So you don't have to pick which model you're applying for, just apply for the scholarship, apply for the school, and then the school will work with you as the selection process commences. Again, just some data slides that I'm skipping for the sake of time. So our scholarship, though, is truly a program. That means it's more than just a check. We provide other things on top of that to make it a truly valuable experience for our scholars, including the ability to network with other scholars, alumni, and community members. We have activities both on the campuses here in Colorado as well as across institutions. We offer the ability for scholars to apply for grants, and by doing it, they have to actually go through a grant writing training, which helps them apply for grants later on in college as well. And we also help them find internships, research opportunities, and network with industry experts and entrepreneurs. So to be eligible for our scholarship, you have to be a graduating Colorado high school senior. So you apply in the fall of your senior year, who's lived in Colorado for at least 2 years, the last 2 years. And you have to be either a citizen, legal resident, or lawfully present, such as through DACA, or meet the requirements and have applied for or started applying for those. And you can find more information about that on our website or call me. And what are we looking for? We're looking for superior scholastic ability, intellectual curiosity, leadership, involvement, service to school and community. Hopefully this is sounding familiar to you. This is ACE. We're looking for exactly the things I told you about earlier. So all those things plus outstanding character, which is usually demonstrated in your essay or letters of recommendation. We are a merit scholarship, which again includes those things, but we also look at merit of circumstance. So when we read applications, we're also looking at the context from which you come. So we know that students in rural areas have different experiences than students in urban areas. Big schools are different than small schools, et cetera. And we take all that into consideration when we read your application. It's all part of your merit of the circumstance from which you come. So if you're interested in applying and you're a senior this year, our application is now open and you can apply directly from our website starting right now. Applications are due November 1 at 5 p.m. at the latest, but hopefully you will be submitting before then because we talked about deadlines. So make sure that you start early so you can reach out to me with any questions you have and that you submit well before that, just to make sure if you have any tech issues, I'm there to help you. And just a note of the process. So we will take all the applications we get. We do not ask for letters of recommendation right away. It's just kind of a resume and essays and things like that. We will make our first cut to about 300 semifinalists, and those are the people who will be asked to submit a letter of recommendation. We will then make another cut to finalists who will come in to interview, and we will select our scholars from there. But please know that some of our institutions in Colorado offer scholarships to people who make it to mid rounds, like semifinalist or finalist, even if they don't get the scholarship. So it's kind of cool to still apply in case you might make a scholarship for getting to that round. And I also just wanted to let you take a picture of this slide. Because on this slide, there's a link to a survey. If you take that survey, it's a good chance to provide feedback on today's presentation. And it also gives you access to a resource guide. And you can kind of see on the slide a link to our website. The scholarship FAQs and resources page on our website has a lot of great information. I encourage you to go there and check that out. So just a quick note here, we also have a book about applying for scholarships. So you can find that online. It's sold on Amazon. It's about $10 if you want your own copy. We also last year sent a free copy of the book to all the high schools in Colorado. So if your school received their copy, there should be one in your counselor's office if you want to borrow it. And then I am going to throw up this slide that has my contact information. Take a picture of that and definitely call me if you have any questions. And so I'm going to take just the next couple minutes to try and get through as many of the Q&A questions as I can. How far in advance do you recommend researching and applying for scholarships? Great question. I would say start looking if you can your junior year, start planning ahead. Most scholarships are things you apply for in your senior year, but it's a busy time. So if you start looking ahead in your junior year and maybe planning, prepping your resume, drafting some essays, you'll be in good stead for senior year. How does work experience factor in? It is an extracurricular activity, and some applications such as ours even have a section where you can list work experience. So that is considered something that you should put in there. How much help can parents get involved in the process? A little bit. I mean, definitely the student should be the one filling out the application, but the parents can proofread it. They can help brainstorm, maybe remind you of activities you've done or how you've contributed. Oh, what does that club name mean? Colts in Action. It was a service organization at my high school because we were the Colts was our mascot.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm so sorry. We are out of time.
I know. Please email me with your questions if I wasn't able to get to them today. I'm happy to do that.
I will leave, just because I know we got a little bit of a late start. I will leave this slide up instead of leaving the other slide up, just so everyone has a little bit of time to quickly write down your email. So please, everyone, if you have any questions for Stephanie, I know we didn't get to a couple of them. A couple of them. So please make sure to write Stephanie's email down and reach out to her. With that said, Stephanie, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate you being here. And also my participants, thank you for being here, because what you do by showing up and just learning is extremely important as well. With that said, just a couple other items. When you close out the window, there will be a quick 5-question survey. So please give us some feedback. We really do love it. Please also remember there is another sessioning happening in a few minutes. So if you would like to, go ahead to the website and check out the schedule and go ahead and join. Also, a few of you have asked about recordings or where can I experience this again? If you would like to relive the fun, all of the recordings of all sessions, virtual panels tonight will actually be on our website, www.strivescan.com/Greater Denver. Okay. So again, strivescan.com/Greater Denver. With that said, you all, again, thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you everyone for being here. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody.